Hello and welcome along to the Sustainability Uncovered podcast from Edie. Coming up on today's episode, are we beyond the era of businesses setting big, bold climate targets? And are those targets actually resulting in change on the ground? We look at the trials, trends and tribulations in corporate climate target setting with the SBTi CEO David Kennedy.
The reason for that is because this is not about companies doing the right thing and saving the world. It is about doing what makes sense in a carbon-constrained world to manage transition risk in particular. So if you don't do anything in a carbon-constrained world as a company, your costs will go up, your revenues will go down, you will become less competitive over time.
We also get an in-depth look at how science-based targets drive change in practice from decorating brand Farrow and Ball.
From an R&D point of view, we've been working with our suppliers to get better data on their raw material carbon footprint. And that's allowed us to then, whenever we're doing any formulation work, whether that's a new product being launched to market, or whether that's a continuous improvement, or whether it's a looking at an alternative raw material, having carbon footprint calculated for that paint at every stage of the development process allows us to make conscious decisions around which formulations and which raw materials should progress.
Yes, hello, and a very warm welcome to Edie's Sustainability Uncovered podcast, the monthly show for anyone working in sustainability or curious about climate action. You're listening to the voice of Edie's content editor, Sarah, and you're probably listening to this episode either at the very end of February or during March. So I'm joined today in our podcast studio by our editor, Matt Mace.
Hello.
And our senior reporter, Sidhi Mittal.
Hello.
And we join you literally a few minutes after being let back into the building after a fire alarm. So if we sound rushed, that's probably why. How is everyone? Matt?
Yep, I am good. The sun is out for the first time in probably a year. So I think that's the reason the fire alarm went off. I think someone just saw the sun, panicked and set off the fire alarm because they didn't know what it was. So yeah, mood is better when the sun's out and lots to be working on in the build up to March is always our biggest month really, so lots happening there, and then lots in the news space as well.
Yes, I'll come to you, Sidhi. So how are you and what news have you been squirreling away on in the past month?
I'm good. It's definitely been a very busy start of the year. So being back in Jan, the first month I was just out and about attending events, and much of them focused on food security, and I think that's a hot topic right now. Everybody's talking about how food security is closely linked to national security. So I've just been at events trying to get some exclusive stuff for our readers in terms of speeches and interviews, and then working on features as well on the back of it. Mm-hmm. So there's this new feature that I wrote on how to make regen ag work in terms of making it commercially viable. So that was a big piece of feature that I worked on, featuring at least 6 to 7 different voices, and I would recommend our readers to check that out if regen ag is something that they're exploring right now. And then Warm Homes Plan was also published earlier this year. There was so much reaction to that, and we spent days kind of going through it, analyzing what's in it and what's not, and the kind of reaction we saw. And then finally UK SRS. It's another hot topic, and it's out now. So for those of you who don't know, UK SRS is the UK version of the Sustainability Disclosure Standards developed by the ISSB. It's aligned with the IFRS S1 and S2, and it's not really a like-for-like adoption of the standards. There's UK-specific terminology and references to more domestic legal frameworks, but the idea is to make it easier for organizations to provide information for investors and reduce fragmentation and inconsistency in sustainability reporting across UK businesses. So a lot's been happening, as Matt mentioned, in the news space, and that's basically keeping me really busy.
Yeah.
I should say as well, it's out now, not just it's come into our inbox about 10 minutes ago.
Yeah.
So here we are prioritising the podcast for our loyal listeners.
It's pretty hot off the press, and I've been impressed by seeing you two delve really deeply into some of these big global trends and some of these really specific documents as well. from my side of things, I think I've spent a lot of time in the past few weeks covering corporate sustainability news. So some things I've written about are that URW has become the first real estate company with a verified science-based nature target, as well as net zero strategy updates from the likes of Compass Group UK and Ireland as well. So everything that we've been talking about is live on edie.net if there's anything there that really piques your interest. And I'm going to be selfish and stick with my topic, which is that corporate targets are actually the subject of today's episode. We've got 2 great guest interviews to bring you, one with the Science Based Targets Initiative itself to set out the big picture, and another with a business that has established science-based targets to look at how those are translating from percentages on the page into actions. So before we get into that, I do have a tiny SBTi pop quiz for you two, but it's just a 3-pointer. So we've got three questions, all number-based questions, so closest wins. First one being, when was the SBTi launched?
You would know this.
Maybe
You've
I
been
would,
around.
maybe I wouldn't.
Been around way longer than I have. 2018.
2015.
Matt's closest. So it launched in 2014 and verified its first company very early 2015. So that's a point to Matt. I'm just going to write this down. I'm going to put a little M.
Do you know who the first company was?
Oh my goodness. Now you're testing me.
I know the 1.5C target, but
Yeah, I know the first few 1.5Cs, so that was like Carlsberg and Tesco.
Wow.
Not sure of the first one ever, though. This one is something we covered on site recently. To the nearest 1,000, how many companies have verified their climate targets with the SBTi?
3,000? 3,000?
verified.
Yeah,
10,000.
it's 10,000. It's good. It is a positive news for you.
I'm just really bad at remembering stats.
And then this one is, which country has the highest number of validated companies? So you get a bonus point for the number, but just tell me the country.
Japan.
Oh, that's a good shout. I'm just going to say the UK.
It's Japan. I was surprised at that one. So the amount is around 2,000. So 1 in every 5 verified companies are Japan based.
I would like to think that you saw the questions beforehand.
No, but
what are the chances?
do you remember having to do a members briefing on the SBTi where our speaker dropped out at the last second, so some of that stuff has stayed with me.
Yeah. So Matt, you are the winner. I don't have a prize right now, but I will go and get some early Easter chocolate because it's all calling to me, to be honest, at this point. So we're doing a pop quiz on the SBTi because our first interview is with its CEO, David Kennedy. So as Matt's alluded to, we know that our readers and listeners have a lot of questions about the changes at the initiative, so sector-specific standards and resources, update to the corporate net zero standard. So if that's you, then don't miss this full interview with David. Yes, as we'll have mentioned in the studio, what would an episode around business climate target setting be without getting input from the Science Based Targets Initiative? It is a pleasure to have on the line their CEO, David Kennedy, today. Thank you for your time, David. How have you been?
I'm very good, Sarah. Thank you. Hello to everybody.
Yeah, thank you very much for taking the time. I know January can often be quite a busy time. You sort of hit the ground running after Christmas.
Very busy over here at the SBTi and a big year ahead for us.
Yeah, and I'd love to sort of get a bit of a preview for this. So when we spoke to your team last year, we spoke to colleagues who essentially reflected on the changes that are ongoing with the corporate net zero standard, the development of different sector-specific guidance as well, and how that sort of reflects a different theory of change for the initiative than existed when it was first set up. So it would be great to hear a little bit about that and about your priorities as CEO for the year ahead.
Sure. So actually, we went through in the second half of last year a theory of change exercise. We consulted widely on that with businesses and with a range of stakeholders. And we identified a set of pathways for us to have impact and a long list of options for things that we could do in the future to realize that impact. And that has been the foundation for our strategy. So the strategy, we're going to publish that in the next month or two, and that will set out our approach over the next 5 years. It will cover evolution of approach to standards, a pivot towards implementation, more focus on that, and strengthen partnerships and expansion, particularly in Asia, of our network of companies. So strategy is a big thing for this year. But you've mentioned Corporate Net Zero Standard version 2, our flagship standard. We've had a really good experience working with a whole range of stakeholders on that. So we've got a consultation that we just completed, 1,000 responses there. We've worked with 150 companies and experts in working groups. We've piloted that standard with 50 companies, and we will be publishing that in the spring. So very excited about that.
Yeah, so lots going on. What's it been like stepping in as CEO while all of this has been going on?
It's been a great experience. And so I knew and had a positive view of SBTi from the outside. I didn't quite know how important the organization is within the wider ecosystem, that everybody looks to SBTi to set the standard. And for me, that gives us a great opportunity to help shape development of the system for corporate climate action. And that's what the strategy is all about. How can we take advantage of that opportunity? I've said we'll publish the strategy, we'll publish the flagship standard, Corporate Net Zero Standard. I'm really excited this year, actually. We will be doing a set of sector engagements as well. So you've mentioned we were looking at sector approaches for some of the hard to abate sectors, whether that's steel, aluminium, cement, chemicals, aviation, shipping, agriculture. We will consult widely, as we have done for Corporate Net Zero Standard, with businesses and organizations and experts as we develop those sector approaches. And I think the other thing that I want us to do now, so I think we're brilliant at standards and setting ambition, and we will be even better with Corporate Net Zero Standard version 2. There's a gap in our framework, and the gap is around what happens after companies set targets. And we need to have better transparency, better understanding, better data, and assessment of that data around what is happening, particularly at the system level. So can we tell the story, an evidence-based story, and an analysis-based story of where are companies making progress, but where are they finding it harder? What are the barriers, the challenges, and how can those be addressed as well?
Got it. So lots to think about for the year ahead. But before we do, I just wanted to quickly look back at the year that was. So the SBTi recently celebrated its 10,000th company with a verified target. So I'd love to dive into any trends in terms of target setting that you've been seeing over the past year or so.
So you're right. We celebrated recently a milestone, 10,000 companies with validated targets. Actually, we've got another 2,000 who have made commitments already to set validated targets as well. So one of the things when I was joining, I was a bit worried with the political situation, particularly in the US. Would companies carry on this path and prioritize corporate climate action? But we have seen really strong demand for target validation. And so last year, 2025 was a record year. We validated about 1,500 corporate targets and over 2,000 SME targets. And there was a real flurry actually in December. So 320 companies submitted targets for validation in December of 2025, and 200 plus SMEs also submitted targets for validation. So companies continue along this path. I should say as well, there are no major companies who've said, well, we want to leave SBTi. This is no longer a priority for us. And I think the reason for that is because this is not about companies doing the right thing and saving the world. It is about doing what makes sense in a carbon constrained world to manage transition risk in particular. So if you don't do anything in a carbon constrained world as a company, your costs will go up, your revenues will go down, you will become less competitive over time. And companies are trying to manage that risk, and one of the ways you can do it is with us. And I would draw attention to something we published around about the time of Belém last year, and that was a report based on the experience of many companies working with us that we surveyed, and that highlighted the business benefits of setting science-based targets. And three things that stood out there for me: science-based targets really help companies to get that long-term strategic focus that you need in this space. Second, it unlocks financial benefits. And third, it enhances relationships with financial institutions and all of the benefits that go with that in terms of access to capital.
Got it. And David, we have a lot of readers and listeners who already understand those potential benefits, or maybe they're already reaping them. A lot of folks listening will probably either already have a target or be exploring whether they can. But in all that, they're probably wondering, when is the best time to do that with the corporate net zero standard update? So I know you've already mentioned a few things about the process, but is there anything else that you'd like to flag as businesses prepare? So say I'm a business that is already certified, what do I do? Or what do I do if a business that's certifying for the first time under this standard?
Let's take the second of those to start with. So if you don't have a target, I would say please go ahead and set one. And the longer you leave it, you're just falling behind. So it's better to be on this path. You should set the target, and companies who are thinking about this will have been preparing against version 1 of the corporate net zero standard. We're keeping that open until the end of 2027. That is what you should use if you don't have a target already. And we will publish guidance about how you can transition and get some of the features from version 2 over time. So don't wait if you don't have a target. If you do have a target, most companies' targets are for the year 2030. I would say don't wait until 2030 to reset your target. So we will publish corporate net zero standard version 2 in the spring. I'm sure many companies will be taking a very close look at that, but I would encourage that you start to think about how will you use it. And I think for me, the best time that you could set targets for the next cycle, so that's 2030 to 35, is in 2028. And that gives you sufficient lead time that you can do increasingly difficult things as you get into the 2030s. So if you haven't got a target, use version 1, do that now, is my message. If you do have a target, well, look at version 2 very closely when it comes out. Start to prepare, start to plan, and you can reset your target. 2028 will be a great time to do that.
Got it. And I know you've probably already mentioned some of them, but are there any key dates or key steps that people should be aware of in the standard update process after the consultations we saw last year?
So the consultations were great, by the way, and let me thank everybody who responded. As I say, about 1,000 responses there, together with lots of different channels for getting deep engagement and input from companies and other stakeholders. In terms of next steps, so we are reflecting on all of that now. We are taking the insights and we are updating the draft of the standard, and that will then go through a process. It has to go to our technical council to make sure it remains consistent with the science, so important for us. It will then go to our board and it will be published. Now, two other really important things. So in order to operationalize this, we do need to develop our sector approaches for the hard to abate sectors. So that's the emissions intense activities like steel, aluminium, and several other sectors. And we will develop those approaches further this year. So we do have approaches, but we'll be looking again, we'll be working with industry and others on really getting those into the best shape that they can be. So that's one thing. And then the second really important thing is that we introduce the use of market mechanisms in the context of corporate net zero standards. So you can use, for example, environmental attribute certificates across scopes 1, 2, and 3 to meet the targets that you set. And we need to put out in guidance how that is actually going to work in practice. And I should say, people ask me, are we going to invent our own integrity frameworks for high integrity offset credits and environmental attribute certificates? The answer is no. There are other organizations better placed to do that. We will have a set of principles. Those, again, we're not going to invent them. There are principles around which we will draw on, but we will be all about recognizing other approaches for these market mechanisms that can be used to meet SBTi targets. So beyond publishing the standard, there's that really important sector work, but then the guidance that we will develop and publish on use of market mechanisms as well.
I feel like I've been writing about that for a good 2 years at that point. I remember when there were the first whisperings that might happen, and people were all of a sudden like, well, what could it look like? What's actually going to happen? So seeing it culminate feels almost to me like finishing a very long book or movie.
I'll probably come in a bit later than you, but certainly I have been heavily involved in developing this framework, and I think it's a big step forward for us. And it's a flexibility on the one hand that companies will find very useful, and on the other is going to provide finance flows that will secure really necessary investments for the low carbon transition.
Got it. And I wanted to ask as well, just quickly, about interoperability. So as well as the questions that I've already mentioned that we sometimes get from folks that are listening, they also ask, how can I report in line with things like new sustainability reporting standards, align with the GHG protocol, and still set and track towards an SBTi? And there's been a lot of movement in other standards and frameworks over the past year. So how are you and your team planning for interoperability, David?
So interoperability works in a number of ways. I've talked about interoperability with other standards for environmental attribute certificates and high integrity credits. What you just mentioned, so the carbon accounting approaches, we are interoperable. So we use the greenhouse gas protocol as our basis, and we work very closely with ISSB and with GRI as well. We are closely involved in the development of the ISO's net zero standard, and we should be interoperable with that. Where I'd like to get to is that we'll be able to do dual validation against SBTi and ISO together, but let's see how the ISO standard develops. As I say, we are part of shaping that standard. So interoperability is a key word for us and a key pillar of our strategy. We will be interoperable with all of the other approaches out there. That's what businesses want. Of course, you don't want multiple approaches to the same thing. That's just confusing. It's burdensome, and the onus is on us and other organizations in this space to ask companies to do things consistently.
I think I can just hear sustainability managers sighing a little sigh of relief, David. Honestly, I could have talked about any of the things that we've mentioned for our whole time, but that is all the time we do have on this episode. So thank you very much for coming on and speaking with me on this episode, David.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you to all of your listeners, and keep up with the net zero corporate transition. It makes a lot of business sense, and work together with us, and that's how we are going to make a difference. Thank you.
Yes, big thank you once again to David for his time. And if you'd like to hear more from him, he will be speaking at our ED26 conference, which is taking place in central London on March 25th and 26th, 2026. So you can search ED26 for full details and tickets. But for us, for now, it's time for a quick break. Join us after the jingle. Hello and welcome back to Sustainability Uncovered with me, Sarah, and also with Matt.
Hello.
And Sidhi.
Hello.
So that first half served as a very macro, big picture look at trends in the adoption of science-based targets and how science-based target standards are changing. For this bit, we can take a bit of a zoom in, having a more detailed look at what one brand with an SBTi verified target is doing to accelerate its decarbonisation journey. So that brand is Farrow and Ball, a paint brand whose manufacturing hub is in the West Country in England here. It's in Dorset. So it was acquired a few years back by the Hempel Group, which has set a science-based target to reduce Scope 1 and 2 emissions by an impressive 90% by 2026. And is also working to halve Scope 3 emissions by 2030. So in our second interview, Gareth Hayfield, who is their head of R&D, shares what's been happening to drive progress towards those targets. Gareth, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It's great to be here and chatting with you today.
No, thank you very much for taking the time. I think introductions are the obvious place to start. I think off call you were just saying you've had quite a long career with Farrow and Ball, and it would be great to hear a little bit more about yourself to start.
Sure. So I've been with Farrow & Ball now for 26 years. I started in the quality control lab, measuring paint as it was being produced in the factory and making sure it met the high standards that we expect from our paint and wallpaper that we produce here in Wimborne in Dorset. And the company was quite small then, around just over 100 people. And I think we just opened our first showrooms in London and in the US and in Paris. And we were on just starting to grow and become a bit more of the household name that Farrow & Ball's become today. And over the years, as the company's grown, I've had the opportunity to grow with it, and I'm now responsible for all of the R&D and quality work here at Farrow & Ball, and more recently, over the years, sustainability as well, because the ingredients we choose, how we produce our paint and wallpaper has a big impact onto the sustainability. My original background, I'm a trained chemist, and I did my degree at Swansea University. Crikey, a long time ago now, when environmental chemistry was a brand new thing, and that was my degree, was environmental chemistry. So it's something that's been a passion of mine from a very young age.
Great. And I was going to ask where responsibility for sustainability now sits at the company. I know you've mentioned why it's so important that it intersects so much with R&D, but I do hope that you're supported in the sustainability work.
Absolutely. Sustainability is really threaded right throughout the whole of the activities we do at Farrow & Ball. So every project and every activity, we need to be thinking, are we doing this in the most sustainable way? That might be how we're producing our paint and wallpaper, how we're packaging it, how we're transporting it, how we are working in our offices, what kind of business travel are we doing, what kind of procurement choices do we make. And effectively, we have a sustainability steerco that our MD chairs, and then has cross-functional representation across with the R&D, with production and procurement, and then also with brand as well. And really under that, there's 4 pillars. We've got product, which is all about our raw materials and how our paints perform and work in the market. We've got our performance pillar, which is all about our manufacturing methods, our waste generation, what we do with waste, and our packaging. People, how we're treating our employees, but also how we're working with our stakeholders, both our suppliers and our customers. And then finally, partners, so our customers, which might be larger customers, but also some of our suppliers as well, and how we're working with them. So it's really across the whole of the business. It's not just one person or just one function. We embed it into everybody's goals and objectives across the whole business.
Great. I'd say given the nature of the business, that does really make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, we're an end-to-end manufacturer, so we are sourcing our own raw materials, we're producing our paint and wallpaper, and then we're also a retail business as well. So we have sales through online sales, and we have sales through our own showrooms, but also to third parties as well. And so we have control of everything, right from what we're procuring right through how we're showing up to our customers and how we're treating our customers. And sustainability is not just about, okay, can we reduce our carbon footprint, which is really, really important, but we also see sustainability on how we're interacting and how we're treating people fairly and consistently when we're doing business with them.
Right, which leads me on to a nice segue here, which is that, as you say, emissions targets aren't the be all and end all, but they are the focus of today's episode. And in the spirit of starting with the stuff that a business can control, I wanted to look at the targets for Scope 1 and Scope 2. So Farrow & Ball's parent company, Hempel Group, has a verified science-based target to cut Scope 1 and 2 emissions quite significantly by 2026, which we're in now, gosh. So it would be great to hear a little bit about how the brand has responded to that target and the key things it's been doing to decarbonise in Scopes 1 and 2.
Yeah, so we took 2019 as the baseline year, and being part of the Hempel Group's really allowed us to do some really good carbon calculations and look at where the hotspots are for our emissions in Scope 1 and Scope 2. The Scope 1 emissions account for about 1% of our total emissions, and we've been focused on getting rid of any fossil-based equipment that we have in here to produce our paint and wallpaper. So we've had a switch from gas-powered forklifts, for example, to electric-powered forklifts. We've removed some of our equipment that was also running on diesel, so some pressure washers and things like this that we've moved over to electric. So it's really trying to find ways to remove any fossil-powered generation within the production, which has been very, very successful. And I'm pleased to say that we're going to hit that target within our own production and warehousing that we have. A little bit more tricky for us has been the 53 showrooms that we've got across 5 different countries. These tend to have heating systems in there when we take those buildings on, and so therefore that's probably the main next focus for us to try and achieve the further reductions. But looking at the numbers, it should be that we would achieve our total reduction that we targeted, which is all about production, but we're extending that out into our showrooms now as the next step to try and make further reductions. Scope 2, we are signed up to renewable energy tariffs across the UK for our production, our warehousing, and for our showrooms, and that's meant that we've been able to achieve the target for our Scope 2, where we have showrooms in North America. It's a bit more difficult to try and get those kind of tariffs, so that's where we've now got to focus on how can we reduce down the Scope 2 emissions. But again, in Scope 2, it's less than 1% of our total emissions, so in terms of we're really confident in being able to achieve those targets.
Yeah, and I think, most businesses are in the situation where Scope 3 emissions, so indirect emissions, account for the vast majority of their emissions. I've not seen, I don't think, under 70% in my time. So there's also been science-based targets set by Hempel to halve Scope 3 emissions by 2030. So again, it would be great to hear about how work on that is taking shape.
Yeah, sure. So looking at our carbon footprint every year has given us, again, similarly with the Scope 1 and 2, a really good opportunity to look at the hotspots for where our emissions are coming from. Like say 99% roughly of our emissions are coming from Scope 3. So that's quite a big chunk for us to be looking at. Of that, 48% comes from the raw materials that we're buying. So from an R&D perspective, that's been a really big focus for us over the last few years. And what we now do is we are focusing on real reductions. Hempel and Farrow don't have a strategy for offsetting. So everything that we're doing is actually about driving the true carbon footprint down rather than trying to find a way of offsetting any increases or any changes that we would come through. And from an R&D point of view, we've been working with our suppliers to get better data on their raw material carbon footprint, and that's allowed us to then, whenever we're doing any formulation work, whether that's a new product being launched to market or whether that's a continuous improvement or whether it's a looking at an alternative raw material, having carbon footprint calculated for that paint at every stage of the development process allows us to make conscious decisions around which formulations and which raw materials should progress. Now, yes, we have a quality level that we need to hit, but that quality level can't be at the compromise of sustainability. And so what the target is not only to hit the quality targets that our customers expect from us, but also to at least be at the same carbon footprint level, ideally a reduction. And that's when we really start to move things forward, is by having those reductions in the carbon footprint of our paint and the raw materials that we're using. Similarly, we've seen reductions in 2025 in business travel as well, by being smarter on the travel that we're making to visit customers or do general business. And then we've also seen some reductions in the office supplies that we use as well. Now, when we look at it all together, meant that in 2025 we had a 7.4% reduction in carbon per litre of paint that we sold, which is a meaningful and measurable reduction, which we're really pleased to see. Now, it's not something that we are sitting on our hands on and congratulate. We're not near the 50% yet, but that's a meaningful step on that journey. The sourcing is really important because working with our suppliers and talking to them about carbon footprint that they have embedded in the raw materials that they're supplying to us, or the packaging that they're supplying to us, really adds a level of engagement from them. They have their own goals. They're looking to sell and looking to supply lower carbon raw materials at the same quality levels. And finding a partner who's willing to test and use those really then helps to create a good supply chain and a good ecosystem of collaboration between us and the companies upstream from us who are creating the raw materials that we need to create our paints and wallpapers. Not only are we looking at it from a carbon footprint point of view, which is important for the scope 3, but we need to make sure that that's ethical as well. So if we're thinking about introducing, say, bio-based raw materials into our supply chain, we need to make sure that that's non-food competing, it's not soil depleting, the people who are growing those crops are treated ethically and fairly as well. And so we've got a robust upstream auditing directly through the procurement team, but then also we would use independent third-party tools like EcoVadis to also screen our raw material suppliers. And by us being transparent and asking these questions is helping them to drive their own practices forward and improve as well.
Yeah, it sounds like lots of interesting work going on there with supplier engagement, and I love what you mentioned about that importance of partnership and that commercial lens, that suppliers ultimately will do this stuff if they've got a partner that's willing to offtake the product and test it and help them with it rather than just give them instructions.
Absolutely. And I think the key for me, I think when we first started looking at the lower carbon embedded raw materials, there was potential for them to be, okay, it's a more sustainable raw material, but not necessarily be as high performing. And we need the products to be high performing. Our customers, that's the first thing that they're thinking about when they're coming to Farrow and Ball. They're thinking about colour, they're thinking about the look of their room, and they want that look to last for a long time. We want it to be sustainable as well. And if the product and the paint or the wallpaper that's going into people's homes and buildings does not last, and they have to repaint and decorate more frequently, they might have a lower carbon footprint or be more sustainable to start with when you first buy it. Having to repaint more often is actually consuming more resources and make a paint less sustainable. So it's really, really important that we hit those quality metrics first. And it almost becomes then that the customer doesn't realize that they're having a more sustainable product because they have the high quality that they expect and the longevity that they expect, which is also a sustainable benefit. And so that's been something that we've worked on quite hard with our suppliers, is to make sure that not only are they reducing their carbon footprint, but they're maintaining the quality as well. Because I think a customer is not going to come back and buy a more sustainable product if it doesn't meet their performance expectations, it doesn't meet the look that they were expecting, and it doesn't give them the vision that they've created for themselves when they're going into a decorating project.
For sure, and I'd love to touch a little bit more on that customer engagement piece. As you said, that some people don't want to know, they just want this to come as standard with their product, and even the most eco-minded people want something that looks great and lasts a long time. But with all that in mind, there are still people that want more transparency, that want all the details. So what have you been learning recently about engaging with customers to get across your story and to help them make the more sustainable choice?
That's a really interesting question, because it's very, you say there's lots of different people have lots of different levels of interest, and some would be, okay, you start talking scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, and they can completely get it. You go talk about an ethical supply chain, completely get it. Other people, it might be, I don't even know what those words really mean. And so trying to find a common and easy language to talk about this is really important. That's precise enough that it gives the information that people are looking for, but then also are not so vague and just saying something's green or eco that then could be greenwashing and doesn't actually mean something, doesn't have any substance behind it. So I think what's really important for us at Farrow and Ball is transparency, because Transparency and truthfulness is really something that we believe in. It's part of our values as a business. And so a year or so ago, we published our first ESG report that's freely available on our website. And that goes into a deep dive into all of those 4 pillars that we talked about at the beginning around product, performance, people and partners, and what we are doing and what our future goals are. And our second ESG report is just about to be published in the next few weeks and months, and that will be looking back of how have we fared against the promises that we made in our first one, and then what have we been doing since, and what are our future promises. Part of that transparency this time is we're going to be publishing an ingredients list in there so that people can see what is going into paint. We're going to be publishing a bit more information about what goes into a paint, why it's there, how we use it, and sort of give some examples of where people might come across it in their everyday lives in other products as well. Finding a common language that is understandable, I think, is a evolving piece. I think if we went back a few years, just calling something eco, people would go, okay, that sounds great. But they are wanting to find a little bit more. They want to know, okay, what is it that you're comparing against? I think there's been a bit more growing awareness of the different kinds of sustainability, from how people are treated, how the land is used, as well as the carbon emissions, which links back to the SBTi. And finding that language of being able to talk about it to people is really important. And I think that's something that's an evolving space at the moment to across a number of different businesses to be able to get that shared language and shared understanding.
Yeah, it sounds like there's some interesting updates coming on about reporting and comms this year for you then, Gareth. And I wanted to as well touch on what else you'll have coming up on the horizon. We've looked at some interesting stuff that's been going on last year and the years prior. And we've touched on some focus points in passing, but it'd be great as well just to finish with a look ahead to the year and hear what you're working on in terms of the next focuses, in terms of, product formulations, processes, any further scope 3 work as well.
Yeah, sure. So there's further scope 3 work in our packaging, and there's a review there on packaging and how that can be further reduced in terms of carbon. Logistics is constantly being looked at to make sure that we are sending our paint and wallpaper out to our customers as efficiently as possible. The less miles it travels, and the more efficiently we get it to customers, the more we can reduce our carbon footprint down on that. So with our upstream stakeholders like our suppliers, what we are seeing is where we've had this engagement now over a couple of years around asking for carbon footprint data, we are getting better primary data from them. And actually, what we're seeing is they are making changes in their own processes, their own inputs, whether that be through from the energy that they're using or from the raw materials that are inputted into them. We are seeing reductions coming through from them. So it's taking advantage and keeping that dialogue open to drive them to be more sustainable, because that will have a direct impact onto us as well. We've got some exciting R&D projects where we're looking at some further alternative raw materials that should bring some significant carbon changes. That's probably about as far as I can say on that at the moment, because it's work in progress. And then further to that, developing more that language to talk to our customers, to be able to really celebrate what we're doing to reduce down our carbon footprint, so that there's a meaningful way of having that conversation with our customers. And I think there's 2 levels to that. There's our customers at sort of the larger store level, which is so where people are selling Farrow and Ball paint, and talking to them to say why they should be stocking us, why they should be selling us, why they should be promoting us as a more sustainable choice. But as well as our directly to our consumers as well, the people who are putting it onto their walls or hanging wallpaper in their rooms through our website and through direct engagement. Sharing some of the stories that we've done in terms of carbon reduction and the great 7.4% reduction that we've had in 2025, so that we can celebrate some of that success with them and show in concrete demonstration that this is not something that's just a wish. This is something that we're actually having a good focus on and making a meaningful changes and improvements on as well.
Great. Well, it sounds like a big array of exciting topics and projects for you guys to work on this year. So Gareth, I'll let you get going. I'm sure you're a very busy man.
So it's been really great to talk with you today, and I'd love to come back on and give you some further updates in the future when we can talk next year perhaps.
Yes, once again, huge thank you to Gareth for his time and sharing his story. So that's almost everything for this episode. Before we sign off, let's take a look at the month ahead for the listeners. Matt?
Well, it's March. There you go.
Yeah, it is March.
No, yeah, and as I said at the start of this episode, it's our big month in that sense. So we've got the Edie Awards taking place at the start of the month, which 19 years now that's been running. So a good way to celebrate some of the people, projects and initiatives that are actually making a difference today. I think we're expecting kind of 600-700 people in the room, which is great. And then towards the end of the month, we've got our flagship event, Edie 26. So that's 2 days, 6 stages, 150 plus speakers, who knows how many delegates. There's workshops, podcasts, collaborative sessions, keynotes, including SBTi that we've heard from today as well. So it's all systems go, gearing up to essentially give our audience, no matter what area of sustainability, corporate sustainability they're interested in, some insight, advice and best practice guidance on delivering their remit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely an exciting month. I'm looking forward to that myself. And Sidhi, before then, what have we got planned in the way of content?
I mean, in addition to all the content that will come from the events, more just stuff on SRS, like it's just come out, to see like initial reaction and then how businesses are then thinking about incorporating it. That kind of transition bit we'll be focusing on. And then AI, I know a big chunk of my last year was just focusing on our AI and ESG series, but I think the space is ever more evolving and there's like more regulation side of things that are changing and shaping. So I think that will also be a focus for me going forward. And then I know I said this before, but food security. We're just hearing more and more. Just recently I wrote a story on how 100 major UK retailers, food businesses, investors are asking for the Good Food Bill, which will essentially look at transforming the UK food system in terms of resilience and environmental standards. So yeah, that's another big focus for me going forward. So a lot just on content.
Yeah, so if you're listening and you're interested in any of those themes, we do have sessions on all of them at ED26. We have a dedicated reporting and comms stage. On AI, we have organisations represented, including Microsoft, and on food, we have sustainability experts from the likes of OFI, Premier Foods and M&S. So really hope to see you there at the Business Design Centre in London on 25th and 26th of March. You can grab all the information you need and browse through the agenda and grab your tickets by searching for ED26. If you are just here for the podcast, here's what's coming up. We've just put an episode live on ED Extra about measuring and managing your Scope 3 emissions. And next month's Sustainability Uncovered will be all about renewable energy. So until then, it's a goodbye from Matt.
Goodbye.
A goodbye from Sidhi.
Goodbye.
And a goodbye from me. Goodbye.